And I'm so pleased today to introduce Rabbi Dalia Marx, Ph.D. She's an Associate Professor of Liturgy and Midrash at the Jerusalem campus of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion and teaches in various academic institutions in Israel and Europe. Her new book is Tractates Tamid, Midot, and Kinim, a feminist commentary published by Mor Siebeck, and she's the author of When I Sleep and When I Wake on Prayers Between Dusk and Dawn, published by Yediot Sfarim. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Dalia Marx.
Hello, shalom, good evening from Jerusalem, good day to you. It's almost evening here. I'm very, very happy to be here with you. Thank you very much, Audrey, and thank you for inviting me to study Torah with you. I find it especially meaningful that you are interested in the inclusion of Israeli rabbis and scholars. I think the conversation from the two sides of the ocean is very important and can be very enriching and fulfilling. And so I thank you very much for the opportunity. As you can probably hear by now, English is not my native language, so I hope I don't make too many mistakes. But if there is something that is not clear, please do not hesitate to use the raise hand function and to ask. We will be covering quite a lot of material. I hope everything will be clear, and you can always ask a question. And the good thing about it is that you can review the text even after we finish. And I would be happy to continue the conversation with those of you who are interested. So, the Book of Leviticus. Leviticus is found right in the middle of the Torah. It's the third book among 5 books. It's the heart of Torah. And in the heart of Sefer Vayikra, some scholars detected 22 units, not chapters, units in the Book of Leviticus. And the middle unit is Leviticus 19, also known as the Holiness Code. Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Be holy, for I, the Eternal, your God, am holy. You have at the bottom of the page a link to a very interesting article by Moshe Klein about this. So, in the middle of the Book of Leviticus, which is in the middle of the Torah, right in the middle, we have the Holiness Code. The demand to be holy, we need to be holy, we have to be holy because God is holy. So what does it require from us? Especially when we know that the Book of Leviticus is, how can we say, somewhat challenging on some levels. So what do we have in Leviticus? Leviticus itself doesn't talk about the temple, but we know that later on Jewish practice happened in the temple. It is very concentrated on sacrifices, on the offerings, on sacrificial worship. It deals with the priestly cult, with the Kohanim. And later on, all these worships were performed in Jerusalem. So it also indirectly speaks of the centrality of Jerusalem and Zion. And it emphasizes the physicality. I think each one of these points is a serious issue for Reform Jews, or at least some of these points is a serious issue for the Reform Jews. We do not hope for the temple to be rebuilt. We do not, usually I think most of us don't want the sacrificial cult to be restored. Most of us don't believe in the priestly cult and the Kohanim special roles in our communities or in the people of Israel in general. At least in the past, although we have to agree that not anymore, but in previous times of our movement, the centrality of Jerusalem and Zion was highly debated, if not neglected at all. And then the emphasis on physicality. Yeah, we always talk about kavanah, not only what you do, but what you believe, or what your intention carries you. So the Book of Leviticus emphasizes very heavily on the physicality. So we have some issues in the Book of Leviticus. Let's consider for a minute the sacrificial worship. We see the sacrificial worship as primitive. Do we need to kill animals in order to draw near God? Yeah, the word korbanot in Hebrew comes from the same root as lehit karev, to draw near. Sacrifices come from the same root as draw near. It feels very primitive to us. It feels cruel to the animals. We see it as an unegalitarian service. Yeah, the priests are those who run the show. What about the Israelite normal person? It's not inclusive because it keeps people away from service or from worship. Depends on their purity level, on their physical deficiencies. Even priests cannot perform if they have some physical deficiencies, let alone not Jews. We didn't even begin to talk about gender issues. So it's not inclusive. It's unaesthetic. Yeah, do I need to explain the sprinkling of blood and things that have to do with it? It doesn't feel like something that we want to connect to sometimes. And as I mentioned before, it feels also not spiritual. Where is the kavanah? You know, we are in our movement, we always look for the kavanah. What is the kavanah in this worship? When we see, for example, the service of the high priest in Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, we will touch that in a second. There is a very clear set of actions that he has to do. But what about the kavanah? It doesn't really talk about it. So the Book of Leviticus feels very alien, foreign to us on so many levels. And not only that, another thing that disturbs many of us, at least in the part of the world where I come from, is that there are those who don't only talk about Leviticus as something that has to do with the past, but as something that they want to restore or to renovate, to innovate, to bring back to active Jewish life. So, for example, you see this verse on the screen. The priest is not allowed to defile himself through the dead. Priests, Kohanim, should not be in contact with dead people. This is why priests, Kohanim, are not supposed to visit cemeteries. Now, a few days ago, maybe you also saw it, my Facebook box was filled with people publishing the following picture. Do you know it? Did you see it? A person, ultra-Orthodox person, probably Kohen, found a way to fly above cemeteries because some of them didn't fly. They had a problem because the flights in Israel fly over a cemetery. So he wrapped himself in a nylon bag, and this way he's not defiled. So these kind of things, it's funny, but it is also disturbing. Yeah? Is this the kind of religiosity that we seek? Is this the kind of religiosity that we talk about? Well, the good news is that we're not alone on that. The prophets also had their issues with the Book of Leviticus. So, for example, Isaiah, in the first chapter of Isaiah, says, all right, he says, Lama lirov zivcheichem, to what purpose do I need the multitude of your sacrifices? Yeah, says the Eternal. I am full of the burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fat beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks, or of lambs, or of he-goats. Yeah, God doesn't need all this meat. Yeah, He doesn't feed on that. What does God really want? God wants us to be good. God is interested in social justice, says Isaiah. And the same thought the same direction you can find also in the book of Jeremiah, where he says, to what purpose is it to me the frankincense, I hope I pronounced it right,
Yes.
that comes from Sheba, and the sweet cane from far countries. I don't want it. This is not what I need. This is not the kind of service that God really wants or delights in. What I want is for you to be holy. Now, the rabbis asked, what do we need to read? What is the Torah portion? What is the lectionary that is appropriate for Yom Kippurim, for the Day of Atonement? And the answer in Tractate Megillah was, we have to read Leviticus 16 from Achrei Mot, because Leviticus 16 describes the worship of the high priest on the Day of Atonement. I think that many of the attendees don't hear this chapter read on Yom Kippurim, because Reform Judaism decided that this is not the kind of spirituality that we need on Yom Kippur, and we read something else from Nitzavim. But traditionally, this is the reading for Yom Kippurim. Makes sense. On Yom Kippurim, we read what the priest did on Yom Kippurim. So this is, I just copied here a small part of it, but you can look in the Bible, of course. Now, the rabbis were not so happy with this text. Is this the essence of Yom Kippurim? This set of actions, a lot of one after the other, but very little is said about the intention or the kavanah. That's why, maybe this is why, they decided to add the haftarah, the prophetic reading for Yom Kippurim, that goes in a completely different direction. It is taken from Isaiah 58, and in a way it even argues with Leviticus 16, because it says, Lama tzavnu velo ra'ita, wherefore we have fasted and you do not see. Yeah, we afflict our souls. We didn't eat. We sacrifices, all the sacrifices you asked for us, but why don't you see us? Why don't you listen to us? And then the answer is, and this is not what God wants for you. This is not what God wants for you. This is not, I read from verse number 6, is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the fetters of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke. This is what God wants. God wants us to treat each other kindly and fairly. This is the kind of things God wants. So the rabbis didn't feel free to omit the reading for Yom Kippur, like many Reform congregations do. But they added a haftarah that in a way challenges the content of Vayikra, of Leviticus. The juxtaposition of Leviticus and the critical point of view of the prophet gives us a richer picture, and I think it also shows us that the rabbis were also having issues with the book of Leviticus. Another window, so to say, that we can open to the rabbinic view on Leviticus and their issues, their problem with Leviticus, is Midrash Vayikra Rabbah. Midrash Vayikra Rabbah was composed in Eretz Israel, in Palestine. It was redacted in the 5th or 6th centuries. And among the Midrashim, I think this may be the most interesting one. Interestingly, yeah, the text of Vayikra is not so interesting, maybe, but the Midrash is very interesting. And why is that? The Midrash is based on sermons given in the synagogue or in the house of study, Beit HaMidrash. It's not so difficult to give wonderful sermons on Genesis. It's not so difficult to give wonderful sermons on Exodus, but let's see what you can make of Vayikra. So they took verses from Vayikra and made wonderful stories out of them. Many of them are completely out of context, but it kind of shows you that they didn't trust the book of Vayikra, of Leviticus, to be interesting enough. They built upon it wonderful drashot. Let me give just a short example. There are so many, I just chose one of them. When they deal with the word metzora, metzora is a person who suffers from a skin disease. It's not a leper in the medieval sense of the word. Metzora can be healed. It can be, or she can be purified. But it's a person who suffers from a skin disease. Now the rabbis were like, what do we have to do about skin diseases? It's not so interesting for us. We want to understand the word metzora in a completely different way. They say, do not read metzora, read motzi shem ra, or motzi ra, a person who speaks evil of another. So in a way, they took it out of the realm of physical diseases and unpleasant and unaesthetic corporal marks, and transformed it to a social crime. Who is a metzora, or who may suffer from leprosy? A person who speaks evil of his fellow human being. So instead of metzora, motzi shem ra. Is there a question or something that needs to be elaborated by now? I think shall we continue?
I see there's one question here. How about how does the act of fasting then lead to our atonement?
Well, if you think about this, is not so much about Vayikra, about Leviticus, because Leviticus doesn't speak about it. Leviticus just say, "Ve'initem et nafshotechem," you shall afflict your souls. Later on, the rabbis in the Mishnah were dealing with the, let's say, the psychological aspects of the fasting, and that also only at the end of the tractate that deals with Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, the tractate that deals with Yom Kippur is called Yoma. It has 8 chapters, and only on the last chapter it speaks about fasting and how fasting should cleanse and purify your souls. Leviticus doesn't talk about it. I'm not sure that it's not interesting for Leviticus, but it's just not in the realm of what it does.
We
Does
do
that
have
answer your question?
we do have a hand raised.
All right.
Brenda, you're muted. Are you there? All right, Brenda, if you would like, you can type your question in the questions log, or feel free to switch your audio mode to telephone, so then you can speak your question or comment to the group.
I think it would be better if we write the questions. That would be, I think, easier maybe.
Okay. So feel free to write your question in, and we'll be sure to relay it along to Rabbi Marx.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, before we delve into the book itself, now I spoke a little bit ill of the book of Leviticus. I raised all kinds of objections that we may have to this book. But before that, let me get one thing straight. I do not wish for the temple to be restored, to be rebuilt. I believe that sacrificial service is not the adequate way for us to relate to the divine, and I'm also vegetarian, just a disclaimer. So, and I do not have any romantic ideas about the sacrificial cow. This is something that I wanted to share with you before that. But I do not believe in a pick and choose kind of Judaism. It is all mine. Even the most embarrassing parts of it, even the most disturbing and difficult and sometimes shocking parts of the Torah are mine. Even those I choose not to observe, they're still mine. So this is one thing that is important for me to share. Second, I do believe that there is a profound meaning in the Torah, and Leviticus is no exception. It just means that we have to try to read Leviticus in its own terms and see what does it want to tell us. And I think it tells us a message that is very contemporary for our days. It's not even modern. I would say it's even postmodern. I will try to convince you about that. Third, I think that we should try to understand the Torah on its own terms and in its own terms. And here I put the words carnal Israel. You know, carnal Israel is the derogatory way Christians called the Jews. Yeah, they said Israel, the Jews are carnal Israel. They are the Israel in the flesh, as opposed to us, that is Christians, that we are Israel in the spirit. And I think that I embrace this phrase carnal Israel. I think our spirituality is manifested also through our bodies and our being human as a whole thing, not just a spiritual. We're not just spiritual being, we are also physical, fleshy, corporal being. And in that sense, being carnal Israel is not an offense to me. Leviticus deals with our being human, vulnerable, frail. It deals with the embodied human. Leviticus believes that when we are in contact with this world, with the world, we are affected by things. We may be hurt, we may suffer from things, we may be affected in all kinds of ways from the things we come in contact with. And we have to take care of it. It's not something that we have to put aside and concentrate on our sheer faith. We have to deal with us being human, and being human means embodied creature, body and soul. And Leviticus does not acknowledge any separation between body and spirit. And this is, I think, a very, very important thing to remember, because unlike our sister religion, Christianity, and I definitely believe that this is our sister religion because we share the same testament, we don't see the separation between body and spirit. We don't have statements like the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. The separation between the soma and the pneuma, the body and the spirit, is Hellenistic, and from the Hellenism or Greek it transferred into Christianity, and then later on it entered Judaism, but you do not see it in the Bible so much, definitely not in the book of Leviticus. A lot of the mitzvot, a lot of the commandments have to do with the body. I will say even more, they don't just have to do with the body, they happen in the body. They operate on the body. What happens to us when we wake up, when we open our eyes, when we stretch, when we go to the bathroom, when we eat, all these things have spiritual meaning. Eating is not just filling the tank in order for us to be spiritual. Eating in and of itself is a spiritual thing, and I think this is one of the innovations of Judaism. And here I brought you a text from Leviticus 12. It is about the woman who gives birth. And not so long ago, I heard a woman rabbi, a colleague of mine, said, I love all the Torah. Every portion in the Torah is my favorite portion. Maybe not Tazria Metzorah. And I happen to like Tazria very much because I think it's very interesting, although it can be also disturbing. But here is what the Torah commands us about a woman who gave birth. And Adonai, the Eternal, spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a woman delivers, yeah, the woman delivers is not a good translation, Ishaki Tazria. When a woman well, let's stick to delivers, but it's not a very good translation, I think, and bears a male child, then she shall be impure 7 days. As in the days of impurity of her menstrual pains, shall she be impure. And in the 8th day, the flesh of the baby, foreskin, shall be circumcised. So what do we have here? Why do a woman have to be impure for 7 days? That can be a very disturbing notion for many of us, for many women. And I, who had a chance to give birth in Jerusalem, and I saw some ultra-Orthodox men looking at their wives suffering and not touching them because the wife is just no longer pure, and that made me very, very angry. So I'm not sure that this is a concept that I would like to embrace. But when you think about impurity here, it doesn't necessarily mean that impurity is a bad thing. Impurity means, in this sense, to set aside, not to be part of normal life. So the woman has to be away from her normal activity for 7 days. Why 7 days? 7 days? Well, as the menstrual period, according to the Bible, which the rabbis then extended greatly. But 7 days is also the 7 days of creation. She created a life. She created a human being. So she should be resting for 7 days. In 7 days, one cannot disturb her, one cannot approach her, one cannot demand of her anything sexually or otherwise. She should be left on her own. And if you look at it this way, it's not necessarily that something that says that she's unclean or defiled. It means that she is gave life from her own body, and now she has to take her time to be rested. But the Torah also marks another stage in her purification period. So after 7 days, she's pure again. She can go back to her normal routine, go back to her family life. Everything she does at home is already, she can go back to it. But the Torah adds 33 more days that she has to stay in what they call Dmei Tahara, blood of purification. She is not allowed to touch any hallowed thing or come into the sanctuary, and until the days of the purification, and then she should go to the temple. That's the coming verses, which I do not cite here, and bring an offering. And here comes a little bit troubling matter. If she bears a woman, if she bears a female, a girl, then the impurity lasts twice as long. So instead of 7 days, it's 2 weeks, and instead of 33 days, it's 66 more days. Until she can be purified and go to the sanctuary, to the temple again. Why for women it's double time? That's a very interesting question. If you are interested, we can maybe touch on that a little bit later. But what I see here is that the Leviticus is interested in women attending the sanctuary. It wants women to attend the sanctuary. You just want to give them the time to deal with other kind of spirituality, other kind of holiness, as it is to tend to a newborn, to a little baby, and only then they can go to the temple to bring a sacrifice and to be purified. By the way, the sacrifice that a woman has to bring is a lamb and a bird. But the Torah also acknowledges the fact that most women probably could not afford to have a lamb. It's very expensive. So instead of that, she had to bring 2 little birds, Bnei Yonah or Torim. two little doves or turtle doves. And think about the woman who carries the two birds in a nest, going to the temple to sacrifice her offering for her birth. In a way, the little birds in the nest look, and the rabbis do talk about a nest, yeah, not a cage or something. They talk about a nest. The little birds in the nest are, in a way, like babies in a womb, yeah, like a portable womb. So the woman is required to offer other woman's babies, so to say, the little birds, in order to save her own child. Now, this idea may be disturbing for us, but we can understand where it comes from. It reflects the anxiety for the well-being and the safety of the child. And we're talking about a time where so many newborns didn't survive, or so many little babies couldn't, died at very young age. So I think this is another aspect of the sacrifice of the yoledet, of the woman who gave birth. Do we have any questions about that, or marks or disagreements?
We have a question about tameh from Mark. It's, can we use the word taboo instead of impure to translate tameh? I think that taboo does not have the same negative connotation that impure does.
Oh, I actually like it. I never heard it, this suggestion before, but I think it's yeah, I think it can work maybe. Yeah. By the way, when I use this translation, I had to change every time it says unclean to impure, because it doesn't talk about being unclean. It's not that the woman is unclean. It's not about hygiene, cleanness. It's about something else. Yeah, she can be completely clean, but she's impure. She's not. She's taboo. She's not to be touched. She's not to be disturbed. And you know, many scholars believe that the laws of purity, what we call sometimes the family purity, I don't like this term at all. The fact that women who had menstruation were kept aside or kept apart. So many scholars, some feminist scholars, believe that it was women who made these rules, and not men imposing them on women. Women wanted time for their own. Yeah, remember the red tent by Anita Diamant? Maybe there was something like this. Women wanted some time during the month for themselves, for gathering with other women, telling stories, elderly women telling stories to younger girls, and sharing the tradition, the female traditions of the tribe or of the family. How much we need something like this today, yeah? For example, I very much enjoy the equality between men and women. I think it's very important. I think we liberal Jews and Reform Judaism is definitely the pioneer before the camp in that sense. But even if we have a total equality between men and women, and it's a question if we're already there, I think that many of us feel that we need time, a room of our own, so to say. Time for us, for women alone. And today, some men, especially in the United States, in Israel it's still a very not acceptable idea, maybe not in the States too, but I think people start to think about the fact that also men need a room of their own. And it doesn't mean to go back to a segregation between men and women, and it's not equal but different, but it means that each one of us, sometimes we need to spend time with other women, or men need to spend time with men. And this impurity periods of time allows you this separation. I think that to the idea of taboo, I think it's we have to think about it more, but I kind of like the idea here. So can I move on?
Yes.
All right. So once again, I do not believe in a pick and choose kind of Judaism. It is all mine. I repeat what I said before. Even the most embarrassing parts, like the separation between the distinguished treatment or the different treatment of a woman who gave birth to a boy and a woman who gave birth to a girl, although that can also have interesting interpretation. If a woman gives birth to another woman, to another female, that means that she gives birth to another potential mother. And that's why she has to be separated twice as much, once for her and once for her child to be. And another way to look at it is that some feminist scholars said, well, the longer period of impurity, the holier the thing is. So in a way, you can even say that it's not that a woman a female is more defiling, but on the contrary, a woman is holier. That's why it needs more time to recuperate and to go back to normal life. I don't know, but this way or another, everything is mine. I believe that there's a profound meaning in the Torah and in Leviticus. Leviticus is no exceptions, and I think we should understand the Torah in its own terms. Of course, that for us it can be very disturbing, the notion of impurity and having to slaughter animals in order for us to be pure again. And I don't think that we should do it again, but I think it does say that things happen to us and things touch us, and we need a mechanism to help us to recuperate. I think it's a very, very positive way of looking at life. In other words, if you can be impure, it also means that you can be purified. If you cannot be pure, if you cannot be impure, then maybe you cannot be purified at all. So you can maybe be always in a state of, as they say in Yiddish, nishtahinu nishtaher, not here and not there. Leviticus helps us to draw lines. There are different situations in our lives, and different situations require different responses, so to say. So it's a mechanism, the mechanism of the purification helps us to move on. Now, if you think about our lives today, what can we offer a person who heals from a disease or a sickness or a trauma or abuse? What can we offer them? Can we offer them something as powerful and as meaningful and as transformative as the Book of Leviticus? And I think this is a challenge for us, clergy. You know, what can we offer people in order for them to heal from things that are painful or disturbing, or, you know, things that touch our lives and we don't know what to do with them? And if we look around you, there are so many people who are sick or are not well or have eating disorders, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that we try to subordinate the body, or we try to defeat the body, to control it. In a way, Leviticus says the body also needs to be able to be, we need to treat the body, our bodies, with respect. We need to acknowledge things that happen to our body, because things that happen to our body also have spiritual meaning. I think it's a more balanced way of looking at life and at what we are. So just an example, in the morning blessings, we say two blessings, one after the other. Both of them are from Talmudic origin. The blessing of Asher Yatzar, you can find it in Mishkan Tfilah on page 32. Asher Yatzar is the blessing for the right functions of our body. Right after that, by the way, after that, not before that, we have the blessing for the soul, Elohai Neshama. It's on page 33. So Asher Yatzar, early reformers, took it out of their Sidurim. In my Sidur, the Sidur we're using here in Israel, Avodah Shebalev, this is the Israeli Reform Sidur, you can't find it. Why? Because it's not aesthetic, it's not nice. It talks about your, digestion system and making sure it works well. I think the English translation for Asher Yatzar in Mishkan Tefillah is a little bit apologetic, a little bit. That is to say, it doesn't talk about the pipes and the tubes that have to function properly as the blessing, the original blessing in Hebrew does. But at least we have it in Mishkan Tefillah. And then we have Elohai Neshama. That talks about the soul. The soul that was given to me is pure, we say to God. The blessing over the soul and the blessing over the physicality, the body, go together. They go hand in hand. They don't, they belong to the same story. They belong to the same narrative, as it were. So, while there is so much that is disturbing for us in Leviticus, and challenging us in Leviticus and in our tradition in general, we still own it. The question is what we do with it. So when a colleague of mine, a rabbi, tells me, oh, this poor bar mitzvah kid, he has Tizriya Metzura, let him read something nice from Psalms. I don't like this. Let's face our tradition. Let's look at it in the eyes, and let's acknowledge also the very difficult parts of it. 2 weeks ago in Parashat, actually last week, in Parashat Kedoshim, Achrei Mot Kedoshim, we read about the prohibition of homosexual intercourse. What do we do with it? Do we omit it from our Torah? Do we neglect it? Do we go around it? Or do we read it and deal with it and say, yes, we have an issue with it, we have a problem with it, and we are going to treat it as we think we should treat it? I think this is what Jews do in general. And sometimes we in the Reform movement have forgotten this concept. We don't have a pick and choose Judaism. It's not like our sister religion, Christianity again. For the services in Christianity, you choose moving, transformative, inspirational passages from the Bible, but you don't read the entire 5 books of Moses. A Christian person may have never heard about the story of Dinah in Genesis 34 and other troubling texts. I say we are not exempt from it. We have to deal with it even if it is very disturbing and annoying for us. But we have to seek first to understand it in its own terms, and then to see what do we do with it. And I think this is our role as Jews. So just to summarize, I believe that Judaism has a positive view on physicality and on our human nature, the fact that we have body, the fact that we have, that our body has its need is a good thing. We don't need to ignore it. We don't need to overcome it. We don't need to defeat our body. It's not a spirituality of the spirit is willing but the body is weak. We can be spiritual not in spite of our physicality or of our being corporal, fleshy. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. We are spiritual because we are physical. And impurity is a situation that calls for tikkun. Tikkun. The tikkun, of course, is a very profound and important phrase, a concept in our tradition. Something that is broken, something that needs to be mended, that is something that needs a tikkun. Repairing, mending, correcting, making something that is broken into a whole again. So the fact that we can do a tikkun, or in other words, the fact that we can be impure implies that we can be pure. Without being impure, you can maybe not be pure. and basically that is it. But if you have questions, I would be happy to, or something to say. I'd be happy to hear your insights.
So just as a follow-up to that thought, should we think of the laws of purity as being absolute instructions, or should we think of them as a way that we're working toward tikkun as an aspiration?
I think that if I understand your question properly, I don't think we should read Leviticus as is. I think we should read Leviticus as an invitation for us to ask again, how do we do this tikkun? It can be a process, and it can be a definite action you do to transform yourself from one situation to the other. But of course, we can. Most of the things that this book offers us are not available to us anymore because we don't have a temple and we don't have a sanctuary. We don't have a sacrificial work. Now we have to transform these concepts into our lives, which are, by definition, more partial, not so definite. Yeah. So what do we do in order to find tikkun after we feel that we became impure because of something? What do we do? I believe that one of the very, very strong and powerful tools is immersion, tvilah. Not necessarily in a mikveh. In Israel, you know, the mikvaot, the mikveh places is a very loaded issue because they are all governed by the chief rabbinate, and it's sometimes not a very pleasant place to be, and it's a very politicized place, and sometimes if a woman goes in there and she doesn't look very orthodox, she can be harassed or asked if she's married and why she wants to immerse herself. So we usually recommend people to immerse themselves in the sea. In Israel, it's not so cold all year long, or in a spring, or you know what, even in a pool. Although it's not halachically immersion, it's not halachic immersion, but this is something that happens to your body. It's not just something that we pray. It's not just words we utter, but it's something that affects our body and soul at the same time. So this is why we think that immersion is a very powerful tool that was neglected for too long in our movement. It was deemed as something that is primitive or unpleasant or discriminatory against women. I think not necessarily in the traditional context of immersion, but in other contexts. As we said before, if someone is healed from a disease or from a sickness, or if someone is dealing with difficulties in the family or in the workplace, or someone is trying to get over abuse or trauma, that can be a very powerful thing to have a ritual that involves prayers and something that we do with our bodies in a context of friends or a community or a spouse or a rabbi, but not just words. Words alone are not strong enough. We need it to happen to our bodies as well. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. We do have a question that goes, I think you've answered most of this, but I'll read it anyway. Perhaps there's something else, to add. What do you mean when you say it is all mine, even the most embarrassing parts? And do you mean something more than just, I believe we should wrestle with those parts?
When I say it, I say that in my tradition, there are a lot, in the Jewish tradition, there are so many things that embarrasses me and so many things that I can't relate to and are foreigners to me, or even things that are not just embarrassing, things that I think that are terrible and cannot be acceptable. but they are mine in the sense that it is upon me, it is incumbent upon me to wrestle with them, as you said. It's incumbent for me to learn them, to try to understand them, where they came from, what is the intellectual, emotional, ideological, theological, philosophical world they grew in. If you take, for example, the prohibition of homosexual intercourse, yeah, I want to understand where it comes from, yeah, and then I can tackle it. And then I can say, yes, it is written in the Torah, but we also hear other voices in our source, in our scriptures. For example, we hear about the love between King David and Jonathan. So the Torah is not monolithic, the Bible is not monolithic, you have many voices in it. Or you can say, well, maybe historically it worked for their time, but we live in a different place. They didn't talk about homosexual love, they talked about homosexual sexual intercourse as a separate thing. And also we can say, well, they didn't really talk about intercourse, they were talking about rape, male rape. Yeah, this is also an understanding of these two disturbing verses. But what I mean is that we sometimes have this tendency in our Reformed tradition to delete it. If it doesn't make me feel nice, if it's not cozy and nice and spiritual, we're just gonna kick it out of the table, and I don't like it. I think we should wrestle with it, because we are, and maybe we can end with that, we are Am Israel, we are the people of Israel. What does it mean, the word Israel? Israel. Jacob was called Israel because he struggled with God. Israel, he struggled with God. And this is part of what we need to do. We have to struggle with our sacred sources. We have to wrestle with them. We don't just need to accept them or to reject them. Accept them innocently like the man in the plastic bag we saw before, or reject them altogether because they are outdated or terribly disturbing. Yeah? So I think that this is what it means to be Am Israel.
Thank you.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you all for being with us, and if you would like to discuss more, we can do it over email or in other ways, Facebook, of course. But I enjoyed being here with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.